Please welcome Chairman and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, Ray Wang.
Hi, everybody. We're going to do the Matrix Commerce panel the other direction. We're going to look at visionaries and the folks that are on here. So let's get on stage and we'll go with some quick introductions. So yeah, let's see we sit in order here. All right, very good, very good. Cool. Well, welcome. So you heard what was happening around trust, what's happening around channels, what's going on in that world of Matrix Commerce, what people are actually implementing. What we're going to do here is actually get a view of the future of where Matrix Commerce is. Now, to give you an idea of what we talk about on Matrix Commerce, it's really about all the different channels that are out there, all the different signals and sensors that are going off in this digital world, how that ties back to supply chains. How do people fulfill that? Then we're talking about payment technologies, we're talking about digital signatures, we're talking about app stores, how that comes together, then the ecosystem around that, and then of course, what's happening with big data around the buyer. Got it all? All right, so quick introductions here. I'm gonna start with Andrew, and you can talk a little about what you do and where you're at and what's happening with the customers, and I'll jump down the line.
Yeah, great. So my name is Andy Lloyd. I'm the General Manager of Commerce Products at Netsuite. So those of you who know Netsuite, you probably think of us mostly as a cloud ERP provider. A huge percentage of what I spend my time on is thinking about how the software that companies use to run their business on a day-to-day basis is evolving as customer touch points are multiplying, and what the implications are to how businesses do business, not just on the customer-facing side of things, but also on the supply chain side of things.
Wonderful, thank you.
Right on. I'm Jason Maynard. I'm a software analyst with Wells Fargo, so I write research about publicly traded software companies, all the big ugly guys. I mean, your sponsors, same thing. Hey. And as well as I cover some of the new disruptive guys like Netsuite and others. So
we may have to just pick on you here in the middle.
Yes.
Well, good, you're not public yet, so you're okay.
That's true, that's true. Mike Nee, I'm the CMO for Avangate. Just by way of introduction, Avangate is a cloud commerce platform really spanning helping sell more on online as well as offline channels, subscription billing, all the way through to distribution and global payments, and really servicing both large and small disruptors in the market, right? Whether it's software, cloud services, all the way from folks like Matteo, who you just heard from, or to software AG.
Wow, okay, that's a wide range. All right, so we're going to take out some notions about where commerce are today, what happens, where the changes, but what's the future look like for commerce? Are people going to stay siloed? Is B2B, B2C, does it matter? I mean, where things are going. I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to talk to you about your syndicated commerce research, which is pretty exciting.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you talk about matrix commerce. There's omni-channel is another term that people talk about. I think that there was this, when e-commerce first came around, there was this great excitement, and everybody ran out to spin up an e-commerce website. And when you look at that, that was really a fairly simplistic approach to things. I'm going to take my product catalog, I'm going to publish it out, and I'm going to let people enter their own sales orders into the system, as opposed to really thinking about it from an engagement perspective. And one of the things that was very interesting is being here is listening to the people talk about CRM. It's very difficult to separate transactional commerce from customer engagement these days, and those two worlds are really coming together. And so when we see our customers struggling, a lot of times it's about how do they get a cohesive picture of customer behavior across store, e-commerce, call center. And so that's really, some of the core operational issues that companies are struggling with is that they've spun up all these separate systems to serve each of the individual silos. And they're now working very hard to integrate those together so that they can get a more cohesive picture of what the business really is.
Is that a technical issue problem, or is that an organizational problem?
It's both, actually.
Are you seeing the same thing, technical, organizational?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's also how you imagine it. So on one side, clearly it crosses organizational boundaries. We talk a lot about engagement here. I mean, you heard about all the marketing. And frankly, every point of engagement is matched by how do you service the customer at that point. And this is where you talk about transactional, really being embedded with how people service the customer at any touch point. But in reality, when you look at how you think about products, it actually crosses organizational boundaries, not just because of the siloed channels, but what is the product itself? I mean, how can you have like fractional ownership of jets? Commerce is actually now embedded as a product itself. And so when people think about this, it's not just channels, but also how you even think about your product.
What about ecosystems and networks? That's where the syndicated commerce thing comes into play. Why don't you share a little bit what syndicated commerce is?
So one of the ideas that I had was when you think about content today. You hear about how marketers syndicate content across paid, owned, and earned media, right? And a lot of people understand that. And so the syndicated commerce idea was, how do you take, let's say, an ad unit and actually turn it into a commerce unit? So
Are they the same thing?
they're very different. You have transactionality, right?
All right.
Right.
So instead of getting some dumb banner ad, right, you've got something that's contextual, relevant, right? Something that you can also transact in. And so the thought process was, hey, if I go to a place and they just sell fries, but they don't sell shakes, how could you sell shakes with the fries, right? And if I'm a guy who sells shakes, but I don't sell fries, how can I syndicate somebody else's commerce in? It's sort of a silly example, but think about it when you are going to travel and you get an email from Delta, and then they give you something that's totally irrelevant as an ad unit in your email. Why couldn't there be something really smart based on what I like?
So I got diapers with Delta, that's just not going to fly.
That's not going to work.
All right.
So.
Well, I just to comment on that, I think we're already starting to see this happening. I mean, the cloud providers, there's folks like ourselves, like NetSuite. One of the things that happened is since we specialize in cloud services, what we have is a vendor actually is increasingly starting to bundle within our own catalog, everyone in our product catalog, should we say. We have over
So they're
3,000
bundling
vendors.
the people inside your catalog.
That's right.
So they're bundlers of bundlers inside the catalog.
Absolutely, and what's happening is right away, whether it's in the experience of engaging or even at checkout, or even going beyond checkout, I'm in the application itself, and I hit a point of, I want to add something on. As a product manager, I can start thinking, what is the right ketchup that goes with this hot dog, right? How do I actually increase my monetization for this customer? And I think we're already starting
But your
to see some
business
of this
is really
going on.
interesting. Your business is all digital goods.
That's right.
Right? These things can be anywhere. So I can bundle any combination here.
But you see the same thing happening. Hardware, you have a lot of guys now transitioning away from just the hardware itself, but selling software on top of that, selling cloud services on top of that. And so the innovation, the speed, and frankly, as a hardware vendor, I'm actually bringing an ecosystem together of suppliers that actually add value to my platform.
And you guys are doing both, so you're going to jump in.
Yeah, and so you talk about the digital world, and this is definitely happening. But we have a customer in Australia that's a furniture store, and they've gone beyond simply selling furniture to actually having classes for interior designers, where they're training interior designers, and then those trained designers are obviously educated on the product assortment that they have. And so from a customer perspective, it's fantastic. You go into their stores, not only do you have the furniture there, but you also have the expertise that can help you choose the right furniture and help sell more product.
We got a number of Aussies in the house. Which brand is that? Can you say?
So it's a company Cocoa Republic.
Anybody know
for those of you who
Cocoa
are familiar.
Republic? All right.
I see a couple
Some
of
nods
guys.
there.
Yeah.
All right.
And Williams-Sonoma is obviously a customer too. And so we talk about Williams-Sonoma a lot, and then Aussies are like, that doesn't matter. Cocoa Republic is where it's at.
So now does that tie back to the syndicated commerce piece? That you had?
I think the key thing here is that if you think about what we're talking about, right, is as you move from being channel siloed to thinking about engagement and experience that we've heard in some of these other panels, there's a couple of things that you have to get right if you're a merchant. And one of those is really understanding identity, right? And then the other thing is, what is the payment mechanism for this? Because in my theoretical perfect world, right, I'm going to get offered a chocolate shake, and I'm going to have the ability to pay with perhaps my Amazon account, maybe my Google Wallet, maybe it's linked to my Amex card,
Your Verizon phone?
my Verizon phone, right? So there could be multiple payment mechanisms, and I think that's part of the whole thing is that you want to remove friction, right, from the transaction, but you also want to have relevancy. And I think that, though, is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges and problems to making this a reality.
So a long time back, I was studying the world of order management, and there was a guy named Cash Rangan, unrelated to the Merrill Lynch guy, but there's a guy named Cash that was at MIT talking about stapling yourself to an order. Like, imagine stapling yourself to an order with all the different channels. You were talking about omni-channel. I mean, how do you guys do that? I mean, how do people know that and keep relevancy, keep context, keep identity just down the line?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at order management, it really is kind of the convergence points of a lot of these pressures that are on organizations right now, because customers want to be able to shop from anywhere. They want to be able to shop your inventory wherever it may be located, and order management is really where you need to pull that together. Not to mention the fact that somebody may place an order with 4 different products in it, 3 of which are in one warehouse and 1 of which is in a retail store.
But who owns the order? For your customers, who owns the order? Can you go to one person and say, you're the chief order officer?
No, I mean, you have people who are in charge of it's becoming increasingly challenging, and that's getting back to the organizational challenges. You have the retail team that is now being asked to actually pick product off shelves and put it in boxes and ship it to a customer because they're able to do it, they may be shipping across town, so the costs are lower and it gets the product to the customer sooner. And then it also can balance inventory, so instead of shipping inventory from store to store. But then at the same time, you have the people who are responsible for the distribution center, and you may even have drop ship relationships.
Okay, who owns the order on your end in the digital world?
Increasingly it's systems like ours, a commerce solution, whether it's NetSuite or a cloud service provider like ourselves.
You guys got to fight, man. You guys are getting come on, you got to.
We own the order, actually. No, but what's coming down to is we're seeing that, and I think this is what's reflected in what Oracle has done, what SAP has done with ATG, Hybris. You guys have order motion, right? What's happening is these traditional ERP systems, CRM systems, are recognizing that there's this thing called commerce now. Something that floats above the fact that, when we have a customer, we go into like a software AG or something like that. There's like 15 order entry systems, many provisioning systems. And really, order becomes a virtual thing that has to float across all these other systems so you can create one catalog to the customer that's relevant to them. Maybe a slice of that catalog that is relevant to each type of reseller, the distributor, and how do you make it so it's contextual within that specific context. And that all comes together in this virtual system, and that's what's starting to float above. And that's why I think we're seeing the amount of, shall we say, excitement in the M&A side that's happening in
There's a lot.
It's a mess. I mean, seriously.
Come on! No, give us a little credit.
And I'll say this is, I'll put on my Wells Fargo hat for a second. So, like one of the things inside.
Do you use French words with that?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this. Like, we have plenty of customers. Okay, we don't need new customers. We need to sell more stuff to our existing customers, right? And that's not.
So cost of customer acquisition is playing into
well,
here, right?
but that's not me saying anything that you guys don't already know. But the question is, okay, so if I'm a NetSuite customer and I bought everything from NetSuite, then I live in the land of happiness.
Yeah,
right?
That's all great.
That's your.
What could possibly go wrong?
But then, like the other 99,
sad Avangate.
but the other 99% of the world has got just a hodgepodge of stuff.
Let's do this. Let's poll the audience here. So just thinking about who owns an order inside an organization, like who owns like an order in terms of commerce. Does the salesperson own the order in your organization? Raise your hands. Is there an e-commerce team inside your organization? Raise your hands. All right. Is there a retail team that's different from the e-commerce team? Raise your hands. I'm kind of curious. I'm just trying to figure it out because like everywhere we go, I don't know who the owner is. Well, I'm trying to figure out who owns this order, who owns the channel.
Well, the thing is,
who owns the customer?
Well, this is the thing. Salesforce. Let's take Salesforce for example. I'm going to pick on them because they're right over there in the crowd. But like, Salesforce doesn't do orders.
That's right.
Like, and they're the system of record for customer, except they don't do orders. And I think they should do orders because ultimately, you want customers to wait for it, buy stuff. I know it's a crazy ass concept, but like you got to sort of, you can market to them all you want, you can sell them and you can service them, but there's got to be a layer here based maybe on events, based on identity, right? That it can actually attach to an order and you can figure out what's going on. So there's this sort of a commerce middleware.
How many CRM systems actually take care of orders?
Like none.
That's right.
Not many, and we would contend that how much can you really know about your customers? We talk about the idea, customer lifetime value is not necessarily a new or revolutionary idea, but when we look at it, we say actually there's a much more interesting metric than customer lifetime value, meaning how much money they've spent with you. It's customer lifetime profit. How much money do you actually make from them placing orders? And when you start breaking things down that way, it gets even more difficult because you need a financial management system that tells you what you paid for the products that you ship to them and how much you paid for shipping and how much you paid for customer acquisition. And it becomes very, very challenging. And so a lot of organizations in this new digital world are really having a hard time making highly strategic decisions because they can't get a full picture of the data.
Well, a bad customer experience could be the fact that somebody wants to buy 15 things you don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. They may,
And then you get billed for it and they can't return it.
Or they may want to buy something that you have, but you just haven't surfaced on your website because it's sitting in a store that happens to be a block down the street from them.
I think picking on Salesforce is actually a good one because, I think, as long as we're just going to pile on a little bit, shall we? No, I mean, I think that you hear people talk about, commerce being the fourth leg of CRM, other analysts. And it's actually true. I mean, if you look at every touch point with the customer, you're starting to weave it in. And we talked a little bit about, even we talk about customer service. FICO is one of our customers, 40 call center agents. Fundamentally, Salesforce gives them a trouble ticket, but they can't service the customer. How do I, if you're not really through with your trial, how do I actually extend your trial for a month? How do I actually give you a 25% discount on the next 3 months of your subscription because you actually had an issue with your product. And so when we look at, not only is the customer expectations changing, but frankly, the long-term relationship you have now, the fact that you actually have something where they're going to subscribe or have some type of payment
So
over
subscriptions
time,
change everything here.
it fundamentally changes the relationship, and that's where a lot of the billing, a lot of the commerce pieces are actually getting pushed into every point of the customer because they expect to self-service, to call you and get the same consistent approach to being able to be serviced, or being able to service by your resellers.
Are they
your
happy
partners.
paying the same amount?
Again, that one depends on your customers. I mean, when we have affiliates or resellers, right? There is value add, especially when you start going geographically, language. They want to be supported. They want to buy in that specific context. When we talk about syndicated commerce and bring it back around a little bit, it's not just the direct relationships you have, but frankly, how do you actually manage the full ecosystem on the demand side as well? And how you enable the channel not just to be able to sell it, but to manage the long-term relationship and to manage it in context.
So I want to hit 3 more hard topics before we get to Q&A, and one of them is payment tech. The other one are trading networks. Are they back? And then I want to know on your end, what have you done that's cool for your customers? Something that's totally breaks all the molds. So you can think about that as I ask the other 2 questions. Okay, so now go on to payment tech. Is it here? Is it what is the payment tech? Is there a standard? I mean, on NFC, does that matter? Is it going to be something else? Is Apple going to win out on these like Bluetooth devices? Is payment tech going to be owned by, I don't know, is it going to be owned by the bank? Is it going to be owned by Facebook? Where's this going?
Well, I think if I talk about, we talk about payments in commerce, we always have to touch the payment side. I think there's 2 things that fundamentally have changed. Number one, it's a lot easier than it used to be. I mean, if you look at why
How back
Uber,
are you going? Why is that a lot easier?
5
years, 10 years?
Even just 3-4 years. Uber, Airbnb, these guys wouldn't exist if it weren't for the fact that the payment guys have changed the rules, right? The fact that I can onboard in an hour and have you starting to transact, if you're under $100,000, and even so, again, there's different rules that have changed. I mean, incredibly easy to just get you going and selling. And there's been a variety of tools that have also been wrapping.
So Square, Dwell, all those things.
Which have just been API wrappers. Again, what you've done is you made something that used to be incredibly hard. You had to have PCI compliance. You had to have the finance guys look at your whole compliance approach. You had to have the product guys look at it. Now developers. CEO wants to embed commerce. And again, you're talking about ubiquity. I want to embed it into the experience. A developer can do it. And this is where payment tech has really come up.
All right, Annie, I'm going to ask you about payment tech. I'm going to ask you about what hot startups you've seen on the payment tech side. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think payment tech is interesting because retailers in particular really want payment tech. They want to know when somebody comes into the store and they want to be able to identify a shopper across channels. And that's a very difficult thing to do because typically a customer's not going to come into the store and just say, hey, and I'm the guy who bought this product online. And so
this goes back to your identity point, right, that you're saying.
And so companies are really struggling with identity because without identity, it makes it almost impossible to track customer behavior. The challenge, I think, up to now has been that there's been no payment provider that's provided enough value that customers actually think it's worth doing.
So PayPal's not good enough?
I went into Home Depot and decided to use PayPal because I'm an e-commerce payment geek, and I quit halfway through because it was just too challenging. They were asking me a bunch more information. I could
Google Wallet.
Pull out. It's pretty easy to pull out your card and swipe it, in my own opinion. But
okay, so you're still back to cards.
I'm a caveman that way.
I think the e-wallets are
You're
going to be
caveman,
the
I'm
thing.
in cash.
The e-wallets
I
are
don't
going to
want
be
to
the
be
thing that
traced.
changes it.
So, all right, on your end, what's hot? Payment tech. You're sitting in the middle of payment tech and in LA. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Well, I got to tell you, I thought one of the most interesting and hottest was basically Braintree.
Braintree.
And the fact that
right.
eBay made the acquisition
Yes.
is that's one of those moves that I have to say, I'm like, wow, they
disrupted themselves.
They disrupted themselves, which I kind of applaud them for that. That was not a small price tag. It was sort of a.
Can you tell us how much it was?
Well, no, I think it was
It's public, right?
800 million.
It was 800, right? It's almost $1 billion.
Yeah.
But they were in a corner. I mean, they had fallen behind, and their own platform was actually just too heavy to maintain. And so stepping up, but also a key part of that was the mobile. The Venmo acquisition was a really fundamental
But is
part
it
of
the
that.
payment technology? Every person I talked about payment tech is like, oh, we spend like X percentage of a dollar on risk and getting frauded, right? I mean, is it the payment technology, but is also the changes that they're doing with fraud management?
I think the fraud pieces for them is still pretty rudimentary. I mean, this is where you're actually going to see the difference between a commerce provider versus payments. And I think this is where folks in the room have to think about where do they want to stop. It's certainly gotten easier to actually embed payments, and that's what customers are expecting, a seamless experience. But at the same time, it exposes you to literally hundreds of questions that you have to answer, including the question of identity. Who actually owns the customer? E-wallets become very popular. They're actually driving their own loyalty approaches. They're the last thing that a customer sees when they buy something from your brands. Is that the brand you want them to see? And who owns that customer? Who owns that loyalty program? right? So when you look at who's going to own that, where's the line that you have to make between what is payment, what is commerce, and what do you have to own in-house?
I still think though, the company that I think will get payments right is Google.
Google.
Yeah, because and they've been underwhelming, to be kind, in this space so far. But I find myself, and I think that their model, which is basically I'm logged in to Google across multiple devices, across multiple applications.
So they always have presence on you.
Yeah, Google is becoming my identity, for better or worse. They're becoming the gigantic superpower, and for them to win in payments, I think is a very plausible way.
On your end, what's happening?
To be honest, we're kind of letting it play itself out. I think the brand question is really important. And when you're dealing with retailers, do they really want to introduce another brand into the transaction? They're used to Visa, and Visa, when I buy with a Visa, I don't even think about the Visa brand. But if I log into Google or when I see the PayPal pin pad in Home Depot, it really is letting somebody else intrude. And I think that owning that customer and that customer relationship, when you look at what mobile has done, it's allowed you to have a much more prolonged relationship with the customer.
What payment providers do you support? Like, what do you guys do?
We're pretty traditional. So we do support Google Wallet.
Yep.
PayPal.
That's not traditional.
Well, yeah, it's. I mean, I would say it's not traditional, nor is it cutting edge. We support PayPal, and then we support a variety of
PCI
gateways.
gateways.
Yeah, gateways. The thing that's interesting about payments, though, is that it's a very different challenge internationally. So in the U.S., it's a relatively tidy little world that if you handle credit cards, you'll probably be okay. And then you look at Germany, and 2/3 of the transactions are done via bank transfer, and so it becomes a much more challenging undertaking.
It's actually even more than that. I mean, part of our customers all are export-oriented. Since digital is worldwide, we've seen easily, on average, 30 to 40% lift if you can introduce something other than Visa, MasterCard. Why? Because, again, they want to pay with debit, they want to pay with local payment methods, but they also want it to look just like they want it to look like. So they want the VAT included in the price. The flow itself is a little different.
No one's supporting Bitcoin?
Familiarity.
No one's supporting Bitcoin?
Not yet.
No Bitcoins?
No.
Okay. I'm going to push the limits there. Okay, so fluidity is important. Payment technologies, but you don't know who's going to win, so you're going to support as many as you can. Fraud, what's happening on the fraud end? I mean, you got to deal with all these returns. Like, we tried to return some people that bought tickets that really shouldn't have bought tickets, and PayPal flagged us as fraud, right? High transactions, we don't know who you are, weird event, all the kind of things. Like, we're going to cancel your PayPal account in 10 days. Our CEO is going nuts, right? I mean, how do you deal with fraud?
Aren't you glad you're not the CEO anymore? You're the chairman.
Yeah, we'll let that transition for a few months. No, but I mean, they were going nuts, right? How do you fix that? And you're right. I mean,
physical goods, it's a lot harder, right? If you don't flag it before it goes out the warehouse, you're done, right?
You're done.
And and so we typically work with partners. CyberSource has a pretty strong offering in that regard. Digital goods, I think, is probably a little bit easier, and we do have a good number of software companies who use us for e-commerce because you can actually shut them down in many cases.
so Nigerian IP addresses are a big indicator for you. And
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole expertise around that we tend to outsource to our partners that we don't get into ourselves.
.ru.cn not working for you.
Yeah, for us, it's a lot more about the workflow associated with managing
so it's the
product.
workflow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, let's shift now to trading networks. And this is where I want to bring some of your expert, some of our friends that used to be at American Express and another guy that's at another vendor. I mean, you're talking about building these trading networks and really lighting up again. These are the supplier networks of the past. I mean, you saw IBM buy, Antoris. You saw Ariba go at SAP. I mean, there's a shift happening, getting the buy side and the sell side together in a network. Where do you see that headed?
Yeah, I think a really interesting example is look at frankly, like Uber, right? Uber is an application for the consumer, but also for, the black car driver. And that, in a lot of ways, I mean, it's a new model, right? Because
does everybody know what Uber is? Just making sure.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. It's an on-demand taxi service,
and
transportation service.
But the crazy thing is, that's CRM in that industry, right? That is the entire customer experience with commerce built in.
Disintermediating the broker.
Yeah. Well, and so I think about, when I think about trading networks and things like that, the ability to actually make that a single experience, I think, is really interesting. That to me is sort of like when you look at your own business, we have to look at it in banking. I think people have to look at it in each of these sectors, especially when you don't have physical goods. That to me is sort of one of the most disruptive things. And I think of it almost as in this case, it is sort of a virtual trading network, right? I mean, they're aggregating, if you will, very discrete pieces of
So are you guys pushing on the supplier side? Do you see this as a trend?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have folks who, especially when you look at platforms, they're essentially creating two-sided markets, right? And when you look at how they onboard, how do they enable those guys to bill? And frankly, it's not just the trade network itself, it's the experience. So those guys who don't know the experience of Uber, what happens is you click, I want a ride, you know when it's going to get to you, and then when you get there, you just walk out the door. This has actually changed the customer experience completely. And this is why I wanted to emphasize that point.
Everything's a little bit more expensive, though.
It's
right?
a little more expensive,
Right.
but your relationship with the driver is only about the product and the service. You never talk money. You never exchange the money because the platform took care of everything for you. Now, on one side, it's an innovation around the trading network. But the other side is it completely changed the customer experience. Airbnb is the same thing. You never deal with money with the purveyor of the house. It's just closed automatically. It's assumptive, right? And this change of relationship has actually really changed the customer experience. When we talk about user experience, we talk about invisibility of commerce. It's actually being embedded into the experience.
So we're getting to this Project VRM Doc Searls world, right?
There you go. I mean,
He spoke at our first conference about this right before the book on intention economy. I mean, he was getting on the edges of where this was happening.
Yeah, I think what you're starting to see, though, is really just a much more seamless connection of supply with demand. And when you look at it from an e-commerce perspective, you even look at things like selling on Amazon. Has very different characteristics of selling on your own website. Somebody who's on your website, you're probably going to have fairly low traffic on your website relative to Amazon, but you have a lot of price control. Versus the Amazon world where you're going to have more traffic than you could probably ever deal with, but you have very little price flexibility if you want somebody to actually buy your product. And so when you start connecting the different characteristics of the front-end demand to the back-end supply chain and saying, well, you know what, maybe if I actually sell 10% more of these by lowering my price on Amazon, what's the implication back into the supply chain in terms of what I can negotiate with my suppliers? That starts to get really powerful. And Uber and Airbnb, I think, are really interesting because they took what had previously been kind of non-digital supply and did that. But I think that there's a lot more that you can do just in terms of traditional products connecting with suppliers. And
we're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer of industrial equipment. And fundamentally, they realize they have $2 billion worth of software actually flowing through and is being added onto by third-party providers. For them, they're putting together a marketplace. Why? It's not just because they want to monetize that for themselves, but they actually want visibility to what's going on in the ecosystem. They want to know why people are extending their hardware that's in these large lines, right? And it's a really interesting play as people change what they think is the value of their products.
All right, so what are you doing cool for customers? Something that's futuristic, where your customers are pushing the limits of you.
I would say in the world of retail, there are two limiting factors. One is, and that's primarily where I play. One is consumer adoption of new technology. What I used to tell my board when I was CEO of my previous company was, we can dream up all kinds of crazy, great commerce experiences, but they can only be adopted as quickly as the customers can wrap their head around the value of them. And so that's one piece. And then the other piece in retail is that generally you have sales associates who are not terribly sophisticated technology users. And so the place where I think it's really interesting is the convergence of digital with the in-store experience. Taking what you know about the customer and giving them a reason to give you their identity so that you can actually serve them better by knowing what their sleeve length is and their neck size.
So give and
things
take.
like that.
They'll give you a little bit more, you give me more service, you give me more information, we'll push the limits a little bit harder.
Yep, exactly. And then the convergence of the digital world with the physical world, I think, is really interesting also from the standpoint that it's actually an asset to the organization when an order flows in via the e-commerce website, that you can actually determine where you want to fulfill that demand from. And it can do really interesting things about balancing inventory and also improving the customer
So who owns the order in your customers?
Inside the customer organization or for us?
Inside the customer organization.
Inside the customer, they're increasingly recognizing that they're organizing around brands rather than organizing around channels. And that's a very daunting organizational challenge. It's a great example of where the software world can recognize a problem faster than the physical world can actually address it.
Mike, on your end, where are you pushing your customers?
Well, on one side is just thinking about multi-channel. And it actually gets to some of the syndicated commerce bits, right? Not only do we have the ability to manage the resellers, but we're also providing over 40,000 affiliates for our customers to be able to get distribution. Because what's happening is, with a huge amount of competition, with a lot of the ability for customers to find online, you need to find those who will help you remarket. And so providing distribution to networks that help remarket their products is part of the cool things that we're providing to our customer base. And frankly, getting to a level of syndicated commerce and putting it into the context that the customers are actually shopping it in.
All right, what are you seeing, Jason? Then we'll jump into a quick lightning round.
You know, real quick, I would say the coolest thing I don't actually have customers, but that I've bought is I signed up for a thing called Trunk Club.
Oh, yeah.
Which is basically men's clothing. They send you this box with your stuff. But the cool thing about it is everything they send you is actually listed online. So there's no gaps in the experience. And I've actually ended up buying, you probably can't tell how fashionable I am from far back in the audience, but I'm actually very
We're in awe up here.
Yeah, these guys
We're
are
in awe. This is amazing.
They wanted to know and I'm like, it's trunkclub.com. That's all you need to know.
All right, lightning round, 5 seconds. Tell me real quick, future of commerce, what's the most important thing?
I think it's about executing on the basics. It's
Yes.
United Airlines delivering flights on time, getting the product, executing on the order, getting the product to the
All right,
customer.
Jason, what's important?
Identity, relevancy, context.
All right, Mike.
Just rethink commerce as a whole and put a box around it.
All right, we are out of time. I might try one question. I think people are gonna give me evil eyes. Actually, 2 questions. All right, I'm gonna do 2 questions right there. Charlie, we'll ask you later. Right there, and then Trevor in the back.
Okay, I'm going to expose what a nerd I am. If the world of connection is the Borg ship, where I'm up in the corner,
Nice.
and I can send it all the way down to the other corner, what I need, what I want. And that's like utopia. But I come from healthcare. So I have a Borg ship of a whole bunch of silos where everybody thinks they are in charge, or maybe they think that nobody's in charge, so somebody else will take care of it.
So payer, provider.
Provider, all of that
all of
jazz.
that.
Yeah. And so, Jason, your point was so perfect.
She likes your
Nobody's in
clothes.
charge, everybody's in charge. Who owns the customer? I don't know, I think she does, right? So I don't have to worry about it. Or I am in charge. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it at my level, and the hell with everybody else. How do your solutions? I love big vision, but when you're in the diffuse Borg ship where nobody talks, how do you bring your solutions to life?
5 seconds.
Okay, so from our perspective, our view is that technology is around centralizing the functions and allowing the people who are customer facing to innovate. So providing a platform for customer experience innovation that's supported by centralized technology.
You don't have a solution. I'm going to pass on you, Mike. 5 seconds.
It's all about distributed order, right? Because the order is the center, and who actually holds the ball at that point in time is what's key, right? So having visibility on the entire chain is why you end up going with an end solution like ours, right?
Okay, so I'm going to connect you guys after this event. You guys can talk on stage. Trevor, you've got a very interesting point of view given what you do. Get him a mic. Trevor does some very interesting stuff at his company.
So I had a very quick question about, no one mentioned the sharing economy. You mentioned the physical economy, and now when you get back into the supply chain, it's about sharing, and how much is that going to be common practice?
Please join our Big Ideas Forum tomorrow at 3:30. There's one on the sharing economy that we're leading. But sharing economy, 5 seconds.
I'm going to pass.
All right, sharing economy.
I don't want to share a room with that.
All right, Mike, sharing economy.
It's all about how do you actually pass the value back and forth. It's just how do you catalog it at the end of the day, and how you actually make sure that everyone puts in the value and extracts the value at any point in time.
Look, Trevor, back to fractional ownership. If you have a high value, non-optimized asset, you have a sharing economy.
Yeah.
Question is whether you open it up or create a trading network or not. Charlie,
Good point.
5-second
That's
question.
great.
5-second
I
question.
like it. Yell.
Use your external self.
I was going to thank our esteemed partners for your compliments about Salesforce, number one. I was going to remind everybody that they could buy order management on our app exchange through Salesforce partners, just like Netsuite, just like
Avangate.
Jason, you're a customer. And just like Michael does.
All right, and we are out of time. So big round of applause for this panel. Thanks, guys.